Hello, and welcome to the Uplifting Relationships podcast, where I am here to serve you with research based information, as well as biblically based information that will help you uplift your most treasured relationships. And so let's go ahead and get started on today's question. I have a question for you, and I want you to assess yourself, okay? So, my question is, are you aging well in your marriage? Okay. And I guess if I had a sub question to that, would be, are you aging more like milk? Or are you aging more like fine wine? All righty. So, here's the thing, family, is that when it comes to time in and of itself doesn't mean that your relationship is going in the right direction. So I absolutely adore anniversaries. I love to see couples who make it to their 40th and 50th wedding anniversary. But the reality is that those 40 years are not all the same for everyone. How are we using those years? All righty. So, the thing about it, the longer, so think about milk and wine. So, the more time that goes with wine, it gets better and better. It builds in value. But with milk, the more time that goes, the more there's a stench, the more there is a smell. And so I'm going to give you all a few indicators of aging like milk and a few indicators of aging like fine wine. Because when we're thinking about time, all things are not equal. Sometimes even people say that time heals all wounds. No, it's how do you use that time? Are you being proactive with pursuing your healing, with making amends? And so here are a few, and I'm not going to be before you long. I think I'm going to try to keep it to about 15 minutes, okay? So it's going to be very digestible. So here are a few indicators or what kind of causes you to spoil like milk. All righty. And the reality is that the longer we hold on to these things, the more we become a stench, the more in the relationship. And I don't know about you, I want to be loved and not tolerated in my marriage. And so here are a few things that can kind of spoil us, that can spoil us in the marriage. One is criticism. Like, are your lips and are your eyes mostly going to, critique things in your marriage or critique things in your spouse? The reality is that that is going to spoil the good in your marriage. And what we see is that whatever we focus on, that is what is amplified in our lives. And so you really want to be conscientious. I love how Jimmy Evans says that your you have to earn your complaints, and he doesn't even call them criticisms, but you have to earn it. So we want to make sure that there is so much positivity going forth before we have to give some constructive feedback. And there is a way to do that. So if you want to go, I have, I believe, a podcast episode on effective communication as well. But we want to speak to the good first and be very objective whenever we do have to make a complaint or voice some of our grievances. Okay, so that's one indication. So I'm going to give you at least three. And another one is bitterness. So with bitterness, it spoils us, it spoils our health. We see that when there's unforgiveness and resentment festering, the reality is that our best self is not coming to the surface. And we want to give ourselves more time. So as time is passing by, is your best self coming forth? That healed version of yourself, that loving, that kind version of yourself, that version of yourself that is doing the work, that version of yourself that is allowing the Holy Spirit to temper your attitude, to temper your words. So, like, I've always heard Bishop Bronner say that there's a king inside of every man and a fool inside every man. So and as well, there's a queen inside every woman and a fool inside every woman. And he would always say, whoever you speak to the most will come forth. But my question is, who are you allowing to rise up within you the most? Because at the end of the day, you have complete control over you. So as time is passing in your marriage, as your marriage is aging, as you are aging, who is performing more in your marriage? Is it the kingdom version of you that is in the likeness of Christ? Or is it the lower level of you, the more emotional, reactive level of you that's not necessarily keeping sight of the beautiful future that God has for you? And then the last one that I want to talk about with respect to what spoils you in a marriage and causes you to age more like milk instead of wine is selfishness. And the thing about selfishness is that it actually is going to be more likely to breed um, a focus on yourself as well as a lack of satisfaction. Okay. So if you are operating like a single individual, because here's the thing, you can be married, but still operating in certain areas of your life like a single individual. So, are you pursuing oneness? Are you always thinking about what you are getting out of the relationship instead of what you're giving? And another way that so that mindset has you focus on yourself. But what we know, the greatest among you will be the servant. But what we know that service actually brings happiness, right? Well, think about when you are um, doing some volunteer opportunities or things of that nature. You may not always feel like it at the time, but as you're doing it and afterward, there's just this sense of joy that comes from giving, that comes from serving. And that essentially is the mindset of Christ that we need to prevent us from being selfish. And when you think about it, you think about a child that we're trying to teach them how to share, teach them how to get along with their siblings. A child who doesn't share, a child who is always, thinking about themselves or a quote unquote selfish child, what do we call those children? We call those children spoiled. So my question is, are you a spoiled child in your marriage? And here's the thing, no one does it perfectly, right? Sometimes, but at the end of the day, it's all about that healthy balance. We want to make sure that that kingdom version, that royal version of ourselves, that king, that queen within us is the one that we let rise to the top the most. And the reality is that we all have a tendency to be spoiled in a marriage, but what do you feed the most? So you got to starve what feeds that childlike version of you. You have to starve what feeds that foolish, lower level version of you. And so you got to, so if you want, sometimes you may have a tendency, oh, I want to be very critical. You got to starve that and you want to do the opposite. And um, and so you may have these feelings of, oh my gosh, this happened in the past and it's bothering you, but you want to get to the point to where you can starve those thoughts. But if we let things go, we got to grab hold to something else. And I think that's where the aging like fine wine comes into play. So if you are aging like fine wine, that means that you are using time to work for you when it comes to your marriage. So instead of being selfish, you are really other centered with respect to what is going to promote the well being of this marriage, what is going to promote the well being of my spouse, and their happiness actually brings you joy. And another critical piece of allowing time to work well for you is what your focus is on. And that has to be on your positive future and vision for your marriage. and allowing that to drive you. Because the research is very clear. There's a lot of research done on your future self. And when you have clarity on your future self, then you are more likely to implement strategies and behaviors in the present time that are in alignment with where you are wanting to go. And I think that is going to be critical as well to ensure that time is working for us and that we are directing time. And so that the future of your marriage doesn't have to be just all up in the air. It could be something that you have a lot of clarity on because you have a clear vision that's not just in your head, but that is also written down. So that's another way to actually use time to work well for you as well. And so another piece, and I think that this is what, instead of, as I was saying before, that selfishness oftentimes leads to, discontentment in the relationship, but in giving, and having a servant's heart is also in your language. So to counteract that criticism, speaking to what you appreciate about your marriage, speaking to what you appreciate about your spouse can be extremely helpful and powerful. And so that would be one of my suggestions so that you're using time to speak life. So that you're using time because your words are seeds. And so if we give time to those seeds that we've planted, we're going to have a positive harvest. So amplify and speak to what you appreciate. Because what you appreciate in your marriage appreciates with time. Okay. So we're thinking about it with respect to investing, and you want to invest those positive words into your marriage as well. So I just wanted to come this today and give you a few nuggets so to ensure that you are aging like fine wine when it comes to your marriage, so that time will be working for you and not against you. So that time is not being used to build up more resentment, but time is developing more closeness. And the beautiful thing about the fruit of our labor is that it's not just for us. It's not just even for your children, but it is for generations to come. So I will just leave you there and feel free to share this with someone to encourage them. And I want it to be a self reflection though. Am I more like milk? Am I spoiling as time is going on? Or am I using time to build value? Oh gosh, you know, that's the thing. And the reality about value in a marriage is that it is subjective. So your eyes and your heart has to be positioned in a place to where you see the growing value of you all staying together throughout the years. Okay. All righty. That's all I have. I'll see you all next time. Dr. Cassandra Bolar signing off. And I hope and pray that this information has helped you to uplift your marriage or any other treasured relationships. Take care. God bless.